Welcome, everyone, to our PeopleSoft Rockstars podcast. So this is a new format that we thought we'd try just to answer questions about fluid development. Our topic is fluid development, and our guests for this podcast are all of you. So we really hope, and we have some questions prepared to fill the gaps in our discussion. But we hope that we won't have to use them. We hope that you'll fill up our panel discussion, our podcast discussion with questions. You can send us questions about fluid development in our Q&A. You can also use the chat, but I'll recommend that you use the Q&A just so I don't get lost as to where the questions are coming in from. So first off, are we presumptuous to call this a PeopleSoft Rockstars podcast? That's the first controversy of our podcast here, is are we being presumptuous? And I'm going to say no, we're not being presumptuous, because our two rock stars we have present have a huge history in PeopleSoft. Jim Marion is with JSMPros, is basically a PeopleSoft legend, has many people who work in the PeopleSoft industry have learned their trade from his books, or from his blog, or from his vlog, or from his training classes, or just by walking close to him in a session or in a conference. You just absorb stuff out of the air from Jim Marion. So Gusty Toluta'u is the Director of Product Development at Gideon Taylor Consulting. I'm the President of Gideon Taylor, so I know just a little bit about Gusty. He has a long lifetime of experience here with PeopleSoft and has done some crazy things with PeopleSoft, including developing what I believe is the most complex and robust fluid application in the PeopleSoft ecosystem. So Gusty has been on the ground in the trenches doing fluid development for years and years now, and he's just an all-around nice guy too. So welcome, you two. How are you?
Doing great. Thank you, Paul. Thanks for inviting me. This is great.
You're welcome. It's we didn't realize that we were being edgy and going off the reservation a little bit. We didn't know that a collab was a little bit against the rules, but Quest was nice to let us have a couple of vendors get together here. So yes, we're glad to have you. How are you doing, Gusty?
Doing well, thanks.
Awesome. Great to have you. So we're going to try to start with a little bit of an informal poll here, an informal start here, and also to kind of help our audience get engaged. We're going to start with some fun polls to help you get to know your rock stars just a little bit better. So let's start with this one. So the question is, which rock star survived a humpback whale attack? Was it Jim or was it Gusty? So go ahead and enter your answers. Let's see. First off, can you see can everyone see the poll? Please let me know if you can't see the poll.
And due to lag, Paul, it might be a minute before they actually know the poll is live.
Okay, no problem. I'm not certain if I need to actually submit an answer myself.
It says it's open.
Okay, it says it's open. Very good. So we'll give everybody a minute. And let's see, it's me respond, but okay, now I'm seeing some answers. So who survived a humpback whale attack? We've got 73%, 22 answers for Gusty and 9 for Jim. The answer is Gusty. Gusty was kayaking in the ocean and had a pod of humpback whales surface right close to him. And he, I don't know if you had to beat them off with a stick or what, but he's still here and still alive with us. So
I was out there with my son. And
okay, so let's see, we're end that poll.
yeah, I just had to get out.
Sorry,
of the
go
way.
ahead, Gusty. You're out with your son?
Yeah, and had to get out of the way or they would have run right into us. So that was fun.
Wow. Okay, so here is the next one coming. The question is, which rock star has had trouble successfully falling out of a tree? Which rock star had trouble successfully falling out of a tree? Okay, we've got some answers coming in here. I'll give you just a few more seconds. It looks like the poll so far is heavily in favor of Jim, 24-2. And I'm sorry, but we fooled you all. That was Gusty again. So Gusty when he was 9, he tried to jump out of a tree from 8 feet up because he was being attacked by hornets this time, and he could not get all the way to the ground. His legs got tangled up in some vines, and he fell head first and broke his arm and ended up with a face that only a mother could love. But so that was Gusty again. All right, so and I know I crossed you up a little bit by doing two Gustys in a row, but that's just how I am. So here's the next one. Oh, so you need to end that poll. All right, so which rock star has lived in an RV? So which one looks like they have been quasi-homeless in the past? Okay, we'll give you a second on that one. Now everybody's pretty sure that I've got to be going to Jim at this point. So we've got 18 for Jim, and it was Jim. So what led you to live in an RV, Jim?
Well, we were just leaving a rental, getting ready to buy a house, and remember the real estate bubble?
Mm-hmm.
That was the summer we decided to buy a house, and we said, oh, no. So we were homeless. We lived in an RV, lived at a KOA, and at the end of that year, we looked at the market and said, no, still don't want to. And so we did a lot of house sitting.
Gotcha.
Between houses. So we really were homeless.
Well, I won't mention which one of us lived in an abandoned church house as a child. It was not one of the two of them. So here's another one. I threw myself into this one. Which of your presenters has a 17-year span between their oldest and youngest children? So give us your answers here. Answer as many as you like. And we'll see, we only have smart people here. See, if I get thrown on to only one question, everybody knows, okay, well, at least one of them is Paul. So the answer, we've got so far 11 for me. Oh, here we go. A few more. 21 for me, 4 for Jim, 2 for Gusty. The answer is both Jim and me. So Jim and Paul are the answers there. So both of us, although I think we're pretty efficient in the PeopleSoft space, we are not very efficient at getting children here. So just two more here. Here's so which of your rock stars was a firefighter? I did not know this one. Which of your rock stars was a firefighter? I'll give you just a minute on this one. Jim or Gusty? So we've got an early lead for Gusty, 5-1. We'll wait till we get at least 20. Oh, Jim's starting to catch up. He's got 4 to Gusty's 9. And we'll wait for one more update. Okay, 8-18. Gusty wins, but you're all wrong. That was Jim. Jim Marion has been a firefighter in a former life. Okay, and our last poll. Which rock star used to dance professionally? Which rock star used to dance professionally? And you notice I am not on this question, because I didn't want to. I could have put myself on just to throw everybody off, but I did not want to be embarrassed by how few people picked me. Okay, so let's see. Results are coming in. We've got Jim's got a good, healthy 8 votes. 38% of the vote for Jim as a professional dancer. Gusty is in the lead at almost 62%. We're up to 10-16 in favor of Gusty. And yes, it was Gusty. Gusty was our professional dancer. So when did you dance professionally, Gusty?
A while ago. I was at the Polynesian Cultural Center. So I performed out there and did Polynesian dances and fire knife and all of that. It's a lot of fun.
Whenever someone says, yeah, fire knife and all that, you know they're understating things. Did you ever get your grass skirt caught on fire by your fire knife?
No, but I did get burned by a grass skirt.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Someone else's grass skirt burned you.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Not a common occupational hazard in your current job, I hope.
Yep.
Okay, well, that's all the fun. Now we're going to get into some serious questions about fluid development. So again, here we're hopeful that that we'll get some great questions. Just a couple of things. I do have some slides prepared, both for the both just a brief intro to our companies, and we have a couple of slides that Gusty's got ready in case they apply to some of the questions. So I'll flip around as necessary. But so here's your intro to Jim. And like I said, he's a rock star. He's and if you're not familiar with his blog and his vlog, please take note of those URLs and follow him. It'll be one of the best things you do for your PeopleSoft education. Okay, so we have our first question from Mark Wright. He says that they are soon to be on PeopleTools 858. As we develop new bolt-on components and applications, should we be developing fluid pages or continue to develop our bolt-ons as classic pages? And we're going to go, I'll be alternating who answers first here. We'll go to you first, Jim. Classic or fluid for bolt-on?
That's a great question, Paul. Thank you. So in my answer to this, I'm actually going to say it depends. I mean, because we really can choose today. But I'll tell you, Oracle's strategic direction is fluid. So if you want to follow suit and do what Oracle's doing, you will go fluid and you won't even think about classic. But here's the reality. Well over 90% of HR today, for example, financials is probably very similar, but somewhere between 90 and 95% of the application today is still classic. So if you're talking about back office functionality, if your bolt-on is going to be used by back office people, chances are their entire user experience is classic today. So it kind of makes me wonder, why would I give them one piece of fluid when the other 99% of what they're doing is going to be classic? It kind of seems like it wouldn't fit together. I'll also tell you, classic is just flat easier to do. So you're going to be done faster with classic. But that might change. And so, how often do you want to redevelop your solutions? Like, for example, Oracle is recreating back office in Fluid. Just this week, I gave a presentation on converting customizations to configurations, and the strategy was in that session. And I made I said some things and questions that I had, and strategy was answering those. I said, for example, there are almost no drop zones in Classic. And I said, so that kind of makes drop zones not really that valuable in Classic today for us, but I'm sure that'll change in the future. And somebody from strategy said, actually, we're redoing the Classic and Fluid. So what you're going to see is a lot more drop zones in Fluid and a lot less Classic. For example, job data. There's already a job data redesign in place. So that's why I say it kind of depends. I mean, yes, I would develop everything today going forward in Fluid, because Fluid is just, it's more effort and development time, but it's a lot more flexible. It's Oracle strategic direction. And so we know at some point we're going to be there. But you might be ahead of Oracle if you're developing bolt-ons today.
Gotcha. Great answer, Jim. Gusty, what are your thoughts on Fluid versus Classic?
So just a couple items on the it depends part. I think you want to look at the type of user that will be using your bolt-on. If in Classic, I think a lot of the pages in PeopleSoft I think of as a buffet, where they intend for it to be a super user who will be able to see all of the fields and options on the page and know which ones to update. And so whereas with Fluid, it's more tailored to a guided, simplified user interface and flow. And so I think really looking at who the audience is for your bolt-on can help you decide which approach to take. The other option is, the other thing to look at is, how will they be navigating to your page? Will they be going through self-service, an activity guide? Will they be using a related action from an existing page in PeopleSoft that maybe is Fluid? And thinking through the flow of what you think of how the users will be getting to your bolt-on. And so those can really help you decide which approach to take, what will be more consistent for the user.
Gotcha. So we have overall direction, we have context, we have audience, we have navigation, we have time to delivery, we have joining like with like, what's the rest of the user context like? Lots of great considerations. Thank you. That was a good controversial question to start with. So thank you. We've got another question. I'm going to insert one of mine though, because I think it goes well here. Why do you need to learn Fluid development? What are and I guess specifically, what are the benefits of Fluid development? What's it going to do for you to develop in Fluid as opposed to Classic? Gusty, let me start with you on this one.
So Fluid is definitely a more modern user interface, and so you're getting closer to more modern web development standards, right? With I think in Classic you could just rely on PeopleSoft generating the HTML for you, and you kind of didn't really have to dive into that and see what they were doing. With Fluid, you are kind of pushed into that space where you do have to look at the HTML that it's rendering and become familiar with that and kind of learn HTML, CSS, and all of that to make it more flexible. And so I think that especially if you're wanting to help your resources move into learning more modern standards and approaches for web applications, that can be a really good strategy to do that.
Very good. Thank you. Jim, anything you'd like to add on that one?
Yeah, it's a great question. Thanks for asking. So first I want to say everything you can do in Fluid, you can do in Classic. It's just a lot harder to do in Classic. Just to give you some examples, Intrasy, if you've seen any of Intrasy's work, most of that was originally developed on Classic. Responsive design, mobile friendly. My friend Chris Couture, when he was with Cyber, doing the same things, using Bootstrap and doing some amazing user experience work on Classic. So you can do it all in Classic. It's just a web browser. So, but the question is, how do you inject that content into the web browser? And that's where Fluid really shines. Okay, so why do you want to learn Fluid? Number one, it's just more flexible. There's a lot more we can do with Fluid that, it's easier to do in Fluid than it is in Classic. Now, I did say Fluid is more work because it is. It's more work to get the baseline. But when it comes to doing that final 5%, Fluid's a lot more flexible than Classic. Right. You also want to learn Fluid because it is Oracle's strategic direction. And we know the reason that most of us have Fluid, or PeopleSoft, is because it's the most flexible ERP system in the world. And we want to know how Oracle's delivered content works so that we can transform it, align it with our business processes. And so we have to learn Fluid to be able to do that.
Very good. And just to get it said, since I'm sure everybody knows, but Fluid has a responsive design that allows the page to adjust to the size of the screen it's given. And so it's the strategy to actually present content that can be consumed on a mobile device readily. And to Jim's point, you can do that with Classic without Fluid, but once that becomes the point and the goal, Fluid becomes the faster way to do it. Is that a decent summary there?
Absolutely.
Yeah. In Classic, in order to get the what you see is what you get WYSIWYG approach and pixel perfect, what you see in App Designer is what you see in PIA, it generates tons of tables and sizes those tables to get exactly what you expect to see. And the challenge is trying to style tables, trying to work within tables to get it responsive is really a nightmare. It's really hard to, and so you're kind of constrained in the Classic world. So like Jim said, it's possible and you can pull it off and there are ways to do it. It's just a lot harder.
Right. Gotcha. Which is why some people have built a business model over pre-packaging a way to accomplish that. Okay, so another attendee question from Rajani Day. One big issue in going to Fluid for our users recently, grid within a grid or a scroll area is not displaying with edit capability well or at all. Any thoughts or tips on how to address this? So looks like we've got a grid inside of a grid or a scroll area that and when we say edit capacity, and Rajani, if you want to clarify it all, you're welcome to if I misunderstand. But I think that you're saying that in that embedded situation, we're having difficulty being able either to get the display looking the way that we want or being able to enter data in that situation. Let me throw that out to either one of you that has any thoughts on this.
I'll jump in, Jim. So with our product, we did have to go to level 2 and level 3 with scroll areas and grids, and sometimes it did feel like we were getting into uncharted territory. And I do think that Oracle, does intend Fluid to be more of a simplified user experience, and so they don't, in the People books, they don't recommend that you try to create a classic page exactly the same way in Fluid. It's not intended to be that type of replacement for super users to have everything on the page. And so something that I've really appreciated is seeing Jim's blog entries and also some of his presentations in the past, where he takes, instead of your typical grid structure and table structure that you would imagine, to change that layout so that it's more of a repeating area, like a scroll area, but with the content, instead of, on a horizontal layout, changing it. And in Fluid, you can do this, change your grids to be more of a vertical list, vertical list, where you then have full control over the styling of the repeating data. And so that can really help as you try to get that ability to edit in a more simple user interface.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yes.
Jim, anything you want to add there?
Thanks, Paul. Yes, the grid happens to be one of my favorite Fluid data controls because it is so flexible today compared to what it was in Classic. Now, just to note, though, in the question, I'm gonna answer this with a grid inside a scroll area, because unless I miss something, a grid is always the bottom of your scroll levels. So you can't have a grid inside a grid. At least you've never been able to before. So unless I miss something, somebody correct me if I'm wrong there. But a scroll area, if you look at Oracle delivered Fluid pages, you'll find tons and tons of grids. You will not find scroll areas. You might find one or two in the Oracle delivered content because they're not using scroll areas really much anymore. They're kind of ending with grids. And when they have to do multi-level, you usually see a secondary page for the multi-level editing capabilities. Now, can you edit in a grid? Can you edit in a scroll area? Absolutely, yes. But first off, if you're using a grid, as Gusty mentioned, go to the, I think it's the third tab in the properties. Is it the layout tab? I don't remember, but choose the use tab. It's the use tab. Check the layout options. Make sure they're set to flex grid if you're on Fluid. That's going to be your standard inline editable grid. Scroll areas, the key problem in Gusty, you probably know this as well because you mentioned doing multi-level, is that scroll areas don't include your usual scroll area buttons. So you have to add those yourself, for example, paging forward and backward through these scroll areas. So yes, absolutely, it's all possible. It actually does, in the end, work a lot like Classic, although it shouldn't, meaning, as Gusty mentioned, you should not be developing Fluid with Classic in mind. It's not just a matter of, oh, this is how I developed in Classic, okay, now let's do that in Fluid. Right. In fact, Oracle has a document out there. It's the Fluid UX Design Standards, which basically says, hey, this is how you should be developing today in Fluid. It's not protected behind Miracle support. Anyone can search for it and find it. Fluid UX Design Standards or Fluid UX Design Guidelines. And it'll walk you through the different grid options. The inline editable, in fact, this is interesting. The inline editable grid is listed in there, and in the document it says you can still do the inline editable grid, however, it is discouraged. Meaning, and you'll notice this in most Oracle self-service pages, what they've done is they give you a grid, but then in the grid, it's display only. Usually has a little arrow off to the right, which is the more indicator. Says, oh, but wait, there's more. Click here, and a pop-up page appears. That's the recommended editing approach on Fluid. And I believe the reason is because it's a lot easier to do editing with a pop-up dialog on a small form factor device. I mean, the whole inline editable idea for grids is based off data entry with tabbing through fields, and that's the one exception listed in the UX design guidelines is inline editable grid for rapid data entry mode only.
Gotcha.
I think that's because, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I can't find the tab key here. So I haven't been able to tab through the fields.
To tab, you just whack it on the desktop. That usually works.
Right.
Jim, the title of that document, one more time, I'm just going to put it in the chat. That's what people can search for. Fluid UX.
Fluid UX design standards and fluid UX design guidelines. Those are the two key phrases that I alternate between when I'm searching for that document.
Okay, very good. I've just put that in the chat, and I'm sorry I was not paying attention to the chat. We've had some awesome little comments here from people, including someone who said that Gusty, you should just stay away from animals. Charlie.
Good idea.
Yeah, we don't let anyone bring animals to work because they go right after Gusty. Okay, great. Thanks, Rajani. That was a great question, and we'll move on to a question from Dan Strange. With fluid development, should we also spend time to learn CSS and JavaScript? I think, Jim, you get to go first on this one.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. So I will tell you that more important than learning CSS and JavaScript, and see, I think this is a misunderstanding with Fluid. It's a misunderstanding propagated by, I shouldn't say this out loud, the tools team when they first started talking about Fluid, because they specifically said, train your developers on JavaScript, CSS, and HTML5. And while that is true, I believe it helps. I don't think it should be our focus. And in fact, I think it gets us into trouble sometimes when we start taking that web developer perspective as we're building Fluid solutions. Oracle has delivered a Fluid solution that Fluid framework that you and I can build off without knowing a lick of CSS. You don't have to write CSS to build Fluid content. In fact, in our Fluid class, all the way through, we have one chapter where we do say, okay, now if you really want to write your own CSS, here's how you do it. We don't teach you CSS. You can find that out there on the internet. You can find lots of people teaching CSS. So we don't teach CSS. We show you how you can incorporate it into PeopleSoft if you want to. Here's why I discourage people from writing their own CSS. If I write CSS today, I'm writing CSS based on my understanding of what PeopleSoft looks like today. Now, 858 looks different from 857, which means that if I wrote my CSS for 857, I may have to revisit that in 858. And that's where I think we get ourselves into trouble when we start writing CSS. The other reason I discourage CSS is because oftentimes there's an Oracle delivered solution that is compatible, upgrades nicely because Oracle is going to maintain it. But if we know CSS, we'll shortcut and say, forget it. I don't need to learn the Oracle delivered style classes because I can write my own. Right. I'm guilty. There's a 107-page document out there. And Gusty has a nice slide on this. 107-page document out there talking about the different style classes that are available. The problem is it's 107 pages, so that's a lot of information to digest and learn. So I think you and I are better served by knowing those Oracle delivered style classes than we are by learning CSS. Now, with that said, absolutely learn CSS. The one place where I see CSS helping us a lot is, and it's what Gusty mentioned, and that is like, for example, later today in 2 hours, I'm going to be giving another session. And in that session, I'll be showing different ways that you can render a grid. For example, did you know that the homepage is a grid? Those tiles on your homepage, each tile is a row in a grid. Well, how did PeopleSoft get a grid to look like that? CSS. Right. And that's the thing. I wonder if you want to do that, absolutely learn CSS. And it's not going to hurt you. Definitely helpful to learn CSS. But I get concerned because people are afraid of Fluid because they're thinking, oh no, now I have to be a web developer. And I don't know that I can learn web development. You don't have to.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you, Jim. Gusty?
Yeah, if you can go back one slide, I'll just point out one little tip. One more. right there. So as you look at that CSS guide, just be careful copying and pasting the style names from that PDF because it, I don't know, the formatting will change hyphens to dashes, and so it's better to just type what you see, at least the dash part. So something that I found is you can go through that document and try and find what you're trying to style elements that you're trying to look for. I found that the browser developer tools is incredibly helpful. That as you are looking at your page, the developer tools can make it really easy to make changes and see them in your page and just iterate really quickly as you test style changes or HTML changes, that kind of thing. Something else is if you go and look at the source for the CSS, you can just pull it up there in the browser developer tools, and that's been my fastest approach to find. I want to find style elements that have to do with margins or padding or field edit boxes. I can go to that source and just look and search through the CSS directly and then find style elements that way based on the CSS properties that I'm interested in.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you both. Great answers. So let's see. One other question we have in our queue. When you say, it's related, when you say fluid development, would it be enough to understand page composers and development registrations? What is the minimum requirement to be fluid development ready, and how beneficial to get CSS and HTML specific learnings? I think we've already addressed the last part of that, but what about what's the minimum, and what about using other tools to enhance fluid development? So let's see, Gusty, I think it's your turn to go first on this one.
Okay. So I'm not sure I follow the page composers part or the development registrations.
There is a, sorry, go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, if you have, Jim.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that. So developer registration and page composer, I believe those both refer to Fluid Approval's page composer, because Fluid Approval's page composer has the composer along with developer registration for Fluid Approval's page composer. I will tell you that learning and understanding and using Fluid Approval's page composer, developer registration for Fluid Approval's page composer, I think it's horrendous. It was not intended for us as developers. It's intended to be used internally by Oracle only. There's no documentation on it. The problem with that approach is it's also the only way to get an approval into the Fluid Approvals tile. So if you are developing custom approvals, you absolutely have to do that to get your approval to appear in the approvals tile and to be configurable through Fluid Approvals page composer. The problem with that is it only deals with approvals, and there's so much more to bolt-ons than that.
And that's, I think, one of the most poorly named features ever to come out. You see Page Composer, and you think, oh, I get to build PeopleSoft pages. No, you get to build approval pages.
Right.
With it, but that's it.
Right. There's also the Fluid Forms and Approval Builder, which could be thought of in a similar fashion, which I would reach to, but it's also incredibly light in its capabilities. But, Paul, I think that points to a gap in the People Tools.
Gosh.
Is there
anyone, Gusty, can you think of anything that people could go to if they wanted to end up with a Fluid application but not have to do Fluid development?
That's a tough one.
Gusty is the primary developer of our product, GTE Forms, and that's what that does. So thanks for the softball there, Jim. But yes, and in fact, I'll take this opportunity to thank our sponsors. Flip through to our shameless plug slide for GTE forms. But yes, if you want to end up with fluid applications without doing fluid development, especially if you want those applications to be workflow enabled and to be able to include them in the fluid approval process even without having to do page composer shenanigans, GTE forms for PeopleSoft is a great way to go. And again, this is that complex application that Gusty was the lead developer for inside Fluid to create a product in PeopleSoft that allowed you to use configuration to set up a Fluid application. So Gusty, any other thoughts you want to throw in terms of, like, for example, maybe you could speak, because you've now built applications both as a Fluid developer and using GTE forms. What's the comparative difference in development time for you to build something in an E-form as opposed to building it from Fluid from scratch?
So it's a tough question to answer, because honestly, I don't have to spend any time using our product to build a Fluid application. The business analysts do it, and I get to focus on the hard parts and the fun things. And so, yeah, they're throwing fields on pages in our product and creating a form flow in Fluid that works on a little device automatically. And so that's really nice, because there's nothing that they need to do to get it to be mobile friendly, right? They just can set it up and it just works on a phone. And so grids end up being vertical with the layout that is editable, and so you can focus on other things.
Right, gotcha. Yeah, overall, I think that for a project team, we probably get complex development projects done in about 30% of the time than we would if we were actually building Fluid apps from scratch. Does that sound like a reasonable number, Gusty?
Yeah, for sure. There's so much built into it as far as our process and pattern that you really then only have to deal with extensions to it when you're talking about additional development or additional design.
Gotcha. Let me.
Paul, I'd like to
go ahead.
Add if I can. The direction or the product that you're offering is really following Oracle's direction, which they talk about it as the citizen developer. Rather than building solutions that require development, instead it's the functional business analysts that are now building the solutions and then only coming back to IT or freeing IT to do the more complicated stuff.
Right.
The Oracle's cloud solutions are all based around that. Even Workday, that's been their focus. If we look at the tools coming out of People Tools and Enterprise Components today, Page and Field Configurator, that's not targeted at developers. They say it's built for analysts. Fluid Approvals Page Composer, it's built for analysts. All of these tools that are coming out, Activity Guide Composer, built for analysts. All these things are supposed to be built for analysts today, which is what your product is doing.
No, thank you. Yeah, if those of you who are old enough to remember the original Karate Kid movies, one of my favorite quotes there was, "The best defense is not to be there," and the best way to develop Fluid applications is not to develop them, configure them instead. So there's our shameless plug here, GT's shameless plug in there.
I have one quick addition, just to follow up on that question with Fluid Approvals. Page Composer and the registrations get it into Fluid Approvals is all a display-only view of a transaction. So you're not going to be able to edit your transaction using that functionality. You're just getting data from the transaction to then make the decision whether you want to approve or not in the Fluid Approvals capability. Right. So our product is different in that we do integrate with the approval workflow engine, but you can then edit the transaction as part of evaluating and approving it. So you can add data as it goes through the workflow.
Gotcha. Very good. Thank you. Great point. While we're doing shameless plugs, I just want to back up here and just show just pull up another teed up question. Let's see, here we go. So here's another canned question for you, and all of you guests, attendees, you're going to get canned questions unless you give us some more of yours. So you have control here. So can you self-train on Fluid? And is there any benefit? What's the benefit to guided training classes? I'm going to tee that. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Gusty.
If I could start with that one.
Please.
So I did not go through any training to scale up on Fluid. I just dug into the people books and really had to go through a ton of trial and error, and it took a lot of time. And I'm really sad that I didn't have Jim's courses at the time. This was 3 years ago that I started, because I feel at this point I would have had a lot more of a foundation and knowledge that I've gathered, some of it which I've gathered since then through trial and error,
Right.
but I don't think that's the most efficient approach.
Better to leave the ground up, learn from the ground up stuff to the rock stars and actually learn from their mistakes. So Jim, what are your thoughts on self-training versus using a guided training class?
Right. Thanks for that question, Paul. As Gusty mentioned, yes, absolutely, you can self-train. Gusty, I would say that if you were to take our classes today, you would come away at the end, you would say, oh, I knew most of it, because you're right, you do, because you've been doing this for so long, trial and erroring, like you said. But at the end, you would say, now I've confirmed a lot of things that I knew that, oh, I was right, because still you have questions.
Yeah.
Second, at the end, you're going to say, oh, I've been doing that and I had no idea why I was doing that thing that I'm doing, because a lot of times, here's how you self-learn. And you tell me if I'm wrong here, Gusty. You self-learn by starting by looking at what Oracle's delivered. And then you say, okay, I want to do something similar to what Oracle's delivered, so I'm going to start with what they've delivered. Here's the problem. Oracle did not deliver any simple Fluid pages. They're incredibly complicated, and a lot of it includes people code. In fact, if you're developing for mobile, I guarantee you're going to be writing people code for what we call adaptive design. The problem is most of their people code is wrapped up in hierarchical application classes. So I'll tell you, you can self-learn like Gusty has. It is really hard. At a conference last week, I was sitting in on a presentation that another customer was giving, and this is great. I couldn't have asked for better. He said, I started working with Fluid. I was trying to build Fluid pages. I was months into my project. I said, I just need to take a class. He said, then I took the class and it all made sense. And I was able to finish my project. So he was headed down that path. And he said, so what he said is, you can learn it the hard way, or you can learn it the easy way, which is to take Jim's classes. And that's exactly what he said, which I thought was great.
That's great.
But what I found is those that self-train on Fluid, they're working harder than they have to, because they're copying what Oracle has delivered and they don't know why they're doing what they're doing. Chances are they're doing more than they have to because they saw that's what Oracle did. Oftentimes they're including style classes in there that Oracle, they don't even have the style sheets for, because Oracle is using a lot of Oracle delivered style classes as well as application specific style classes that we don't even know. It's there. I'm afraid to take it away. What's it doing? I would also say, Paul, it isn't just Fluid training. It's the quality of the training, the caliber of the training. And this is one of those things I don't like to talk about much because it sounds like I'm bragging. But I can't tell you how many times I've been teaching a class and heard some other students talking, or someone's come up to me later and said, oh, thank you so much. Just one of them, the one that stands out the most, was at the morning break. I was doing a class. This was a Fluid to advanced Fluid class or intermediate Fluid class. The organization said, we don't need the basics. We've already had 3 other Fluid classes. And so I got into the room and I said, okay, I want to see, let's just do a level set. Let's find out, what do they really know? So I did a quick review in the first morning of the entire basic Fluid class. in the first hour and a half. And at the end, we're all getting up, to go take our morning break, and I hear these two people talking on the side. I said, "Oh my goodness, Jim's been our third fluid trainer, and I learned more in this hour and a half than I learned in those other sessions combined." And I thought, oh, that is so sad, because you know how much money they spent on that other training?
Right. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I think that there's a ton of value, especially the way that I think, in learning the reasons why. And that's what I really love about working with Jim is that Jim can pull together, this is why it's the way that it is, even if it's not perfect. If you know why it's the way that it is, it really helps in making development decisions around that. Thank you, Jim. So Michelle gave us a question that really cues up Gusty. She says, it looks like there looks to be some interesting technical information in the slide deck that you flipped by quickly. Can you speak to a few of those slides? So I'm going to go ahead and head back to those, past our NASCAR slide here. So I'll just bring these up, and then you guys can maybe talk to what you're seeing here. And Gusty, if you can lead this, since you provided these slides, that'd be great. Sure.
Just a time check. So we have about 8 minutes left. Is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, great. We'll just go quickly through these. Like Jim said, you can look at examples, and so I found that just querying the People's Tools tables to try and find examples helps a lot. And so these are a couple of helpful queries to find fluid components or pages, and then also examples of fluid functions being used in people code, because that can be helpful to then see the behavior or see how it's used.
Gotcha. So then, use the metadata to query where you can find examples.
That's right. Yep.
Right. Gotcha.
And then style classes there at the bottom. So examples of a style being used on a Deliver PeopleSoft page. And then you can find the navigation to that page to see how it behaves. So,
very good. Very good. And you've got your set default viewport that can be easy to forget to put in there.
Yep. So this is just so that it resizes based on the user's device.
You would think it would do that by default, wouldn't you? But
yep.
They do leave it to you to stick that in.
And Gusty, I'd like to add to this one. The reason that we do this is because on a desktop, the screen looks fine, but when you try to load that up on a mobile device, it's going to be completely zoomed out, fitting all the content. And so the point of this little tidbit is so that it does actually apply the responsive or adaptive design and show make it fit on the screen in, so you don't have to have your binoculars out to look at your phone to be able to see the content. And like you mentioned, Paul, it seems like this should be part of the People Tools framework by itself. I think it should really be there. But Gusty, when I saw this slide, I wanted to ask you, when you're testing mobile in small form factor, do you use the train settings?
Yes, I do. So we found that you open up the developer tools, switch into the emulator mode for the device type, and make sure that you sign out of PeopleSoft and sign in while you're in the emulator, so that it sets your session and the rest of the experience will be mobile friendly.
Right. So what I was thinking is if you put in the URL trace equals Y, then it will let you choose the form factor size as an option, but I don't like it. I do exactly what you do also. I open the developer tools and go into emulation mode in my browser to view the different types. And the reason that I do that is because PeopleSoft actually treats iPhones different from Android devices. And you wouldn't know that unless you actually tested emulating the different device types. Whereas just a small, medium, large, and extra large from the drop-down list doesn't give you that. And this right here, it gives a different viewport string for iPhones than it does for Androids, which is what made me think of that on this slide.
Awesome. Great comments. Thank you. So flipping through some more here, Gusty, want to speak to
Yeah,
this?
in fluid development, group boxes are critical, and so and divs and how things are laid out. And so setting this layout setting can be really helpful to see where elements are falling within the different divs. So
Awesome.
I've found that to be critical as you're trying to work through what the layout ends up being in the UI.
That's great. That's great. Anything on this one?
Subpages documentation isn't super clear on this. They say make sure you wrap subpages in a group box. I've found that you have to wrap the outside of the group box and wrap the inside of the group box with, wrap the outside of the subpage with the group box and the inside of the subpage with the group box. And that, yeah.
When in doubt, add more group boxes.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I say. That's what I say. I tell everybody, just throw another group box at it. You can't go wrong with a group box.
Yeah,
You know,
don't buy 6 packs of group boxes. You need to buy the case.
By the case,
Yes.
exactly. I saw that guidance also, Gusty, and when I'm building my own, I always start out with PS Simple SBF, or SBP layout, which gives you the group box on the inside. Whether or not you put a group box on the outside, you don't always have to. I mean, it behaves fine, but it doesn't hurt to throw a group box at it. So that's why I just say, just add more group boxes. It can't hurt.
Yeah.
If something isn't doing what you want, just try another group box.
So again, back to my trial and error to figure this out. What we ended up finding was that elements from inside the subpage were ending up overlapping or ending up in divs outside of the subpage, and so the group box seemed to contain it. But like I said, there might be something I'm missing that Jim's training would show me how to get around that.
I've had that happen with and without group boxes when using subpages. It's the weirdest thing. I like to demonstrate that in our header page section. And here's my trick. You take that field that's inside the subpage and you click on it, you hit the arrow key to bump it. You just move it. That's it. Save your page, and now the content shows in the right spot.
So just re-registering where the location of the field is makes a difference.
It's like it's a cache thing or something. I don't know.
Wow.
It's the weirdest thing.
Interesting. All right. Well, great. Oh, thank you. Let's see. We hit that one. So want to hit this one real quick, Gusty?
Yeah, just the point on this one is your structure, your data structure in Classic Pages still continue. So you're still taking the records and data, the data structure that you're used to in Classic, and using that in Fluid, using grids and and different records. But in Fluid, there's some additional steps. So in the case of related display fields, you still have to structure it with, as a related display to control and display related display field.
Right.
But then you have to add styles as well for Fluid and a container group box around it to get the same behavior. So this was just a good representation of Fluid, just then adds some additional steps.
Gotcha. Very good. Well, thank you. Let's see, we hit that one. I'm actually going to skip past and end with one more shameless plug here, just to cycling back to what you can do with GTE forms, what a Fluid application can look like that was developed with GTE forms. So here we're actually starting an eForm from the My Teams application. We've added related action to launch an eForm from the delivered My Teams page. And so now here we are in an application that was built by, I like Jim's phrase of citizen developer, built by a business analyst, and including dynamic behavior and cascading lookups and all sorts of things. And then also, of course, built in, we've got conditional logic to require certain attachments here, and we're still able to end up with a really sleek design that fits on a mobile device really well. And and really can host very complex business logic. And that's being able to put the business logic in the hands of the business owner, of the business analyst, is a really powerful approach. Like Gusty said, the fastest way to develop, well, I guess I said that. The fastest way to develop fluid applications is not to develop them, configure them instead. So so that is just a quick look at what you can do with GTE forms. I hope you'll check out JSMPros booth in the Discovery Expo, and consider using Jim soon to boost your fluid knowledge. And please come visit us and see how we can help to reduce the need for fluid development and help you target your fluid development in the places where that's really the best solution and the only way to go, and be able to put things in the hands of your business analysts. So thank you all for attending. Thanks for your great questions. That really helped I hope you enjoyed our kind of relaxed podcast style. And I hope you enjoyed my podcast-friendly microphone here that Jim was admiring before the session. So thank you, everyone. We will post the slide deck for your reference, and feel free to contact any of us for additional questions. Thank you all so much.